Okay. Hi. Look, I dressed up today. Just a little bit. Although I'm still wearing the hat because my hair looks like Garbo. So, today I wanted to talk about cozy games. Cozy games, that term's kind of thrown around a bit, but it's garnered a lot of attention within the last few years. I mean, actually, it's been pretty popular for a while now, but with games like Stardew Valley, it really took off. Now, again, Stardew Valley is like a decade old at this point, so not exactly new. But I was just thinking about it, and what makes a good cozy game, and what are people often looking for in cozy games, and what do they want from those games, and how do you achieve that feeling that people so often chase? I've played a few of these. I haven't played a ton. I've played obviously there's the farming sim type that it's a farming sim and also very often a social simulator. So that's Stardew Valley. You spend the game farming, meeting people, harvest or cultivating relationships, and progressing to a goal. There's growth, right? Side note: I feel like Schedule One falls under Schedule One and Stardew Valley are very similar in my brain in terms of gameplay loops. Obviously, because they're both like simulator games and they're about growth. But Schedule One scales so well. I want to talk about that later in a separate video. But anyway, so you've got the farming sim type. You've got Stardew Valley, Fields of Mistria. I would hesitate to say it's a this kind of falls outside of the Stardew farming type, but is still a social type that has a very similar feeling. You've got games like Palia, or I haven't played Disney Dreamlight Valley Wonder Superland or whatever it's called. I don't know anything about that. But the point is there's a lot of these games. Those are four of the most popular ones that just off the top of my head. But there are dozens, if not hundreds, if not thousands of these games that people are making. And they are still making them, and they are still popular is the thing. I have a belief that COVID really helped give a boost to a lot of these types of games because people were seeking some form of solace outside of the realms of their own home. So they played a lot of these games. Of course, I did. Games like Animal Crossing. Animal Crossing is a cozy game, assuredly, right? It took off enormously during that time. Animal Crossing New Horizons, I should say. I played the original when it. I think it came out around when I was born, so obviously not. I didn't play it when it came out, but I played that on the GameCube. I love that game. Well, we're gonna get to that. But a lot of people are still making these games, and so I thought, well, maybe it would be nice to offer my own thoughts and share my own opinions. Perhaps someone else might learn something or get something from this. So, how do you make a cozy game? How do you find that feeling of coziness and distill it? But what is that, right? What is that feeling? Because that's kind of vague. Cozy, right? What could that mean? I think cozy and comfort are a similar thing, and my mind goes first and foremost to thinking about my comfort movies. Movies that I watch when I'm feeling down, when I'm not feeling great, or I just want to feel a bit at home or at ease. The strange thing about those movies is they're often not very traditionally comforting movies. Now, there are some, certainly. This is a weird one, and I don't expect anyone else to have this, but The Batman, as in the Robert Pattinson, The Batman, for some reason, has risen the ranks as a comfort movie for me, and my brain goes, it's cozy. I don't know how I need to dissect that later, but I think that a lot. But I think a lot of people, especially in the gaming sphere, in the cozy gaming sphere, if you were to ask them, what's a comfort movie of yours? A lot of people would say Studio Ghibli films, right? Spirited Away, Castle in the Sky, Howl's Moving Castle, Ponyo, Porco Rosso, when Marnie was there, Secret World of Arrietty, the list goes on, right? A lot of great movies. The most common that people talk about is like Spirited Away and Howl's Moving Castle, right? Those are the two. Although my personal favorite is probably Porco Rosso. But those movies are often cited as inspiration a lot of the time for these cozy games. It's not uncommon for people, the developers, to regularly cite, oh, well, I just took a lot of inspiration from Howl's Moving Castle, Spirited Away when I was making this. That's great. But why is that? Why? Why is that? And I think it can be easy to dismiss to assume that it's because those movies feel safe, right? and they do a lot of the times. A lot of the times the stakes in those movies are very low, but an important thing to note is that they are never zero. The stakes in Studio Ghibli movies are never zero, and that's a mistake that I think some people can make when trying to achieve that cozy feel for their games that they're making, right? If you're making a farming sim, a social sim, or whatever, it can be anything. Those games sometimes can feel shallow and almost shoot themselves in the foot when they remove danger, when they remove any sense of threat or any opposition. I'm trying to think of an instance. Admittedly, I haven't played a lot, so I kind of feel a little out of my depth in terms of what I can reference here. But I do know there are instances where that has occurred, where a game leans so hard into the safety, into the feeling of belonging, and like you're in this social perfection, that it can feel like there's no pushback. And no pushback means you have nothing to compare. There's that, there's people talk about how, you can't have darkness without light, right? You can't have shadow without light. You can't have light without shadow. If there's no bad, how can you have good? Because there's nothing to compare it to. Something that I think makes the Studio Ghibli movies very good is they showcase stressors, and there's not often, the funny thing is there's not often antagonists that are inherently evil or super malicious in Ghibli movies. There are in Castle in the Sky, there's more obvious bad guys. But even in Spirited Away, you watch it and Yubaba the witch, she's at oppositions. She's at opposition with Chihiro, our protagonist. So by definition, she is, an antagonist. But the more time you spend with her, the more you realize she really is just trying to run a bathhouse, and you come to understand her. And by the end of the movie, I hardly personally think of her as an enemy or evil, or even as an antagonist. And that's very common in Ghibli films. So it's not that they're, there often isn't an obvious antagonist, but there is still opposition, and there is still pushback. And sometimes that pushback is nature, or maybe like in My Neighbor Totoro, the mother is ill, right? That's one of the big points of conflict in the story, is that the mother is ill. So it's not that there's an enemy, it's just that there's some pushback. There's some pushback against the characters that is causing them to either retreat or surround themselves in things that are comforting. And you as the viewer also get to experience that. There's a reason why that cooking scene in Howl's Moving Castle is so highly regarded, right? That breakfast scene where obviously where Howl steps in and they're making the breakfast and the bacon and the eggs and everything, right? And obviously, presentation does a lot. The animation is tremendous. The sound design is really sharp and good. But these all tie into the point I'm going to make. That scene feels so cozy. I don't want to overuse that word, but it is the word that people use to describe these things, and it is the word that people use to describe, the games that they're trying to make that emulate this feeling. So, that scene is so cozy because it's contradicted so well with the terror, fear, and unease that happens just before that with our main protagonist, Sophie. She's been cursed. She's wandering through the wastes, and things are not great for a good chunk of time before that scene. And then you get this scene, and there's still, funny thing is, there's still some ambivalence there, right? There's still some conflicting emotions because I knocked my boy. There's still some conflicting emotions because there's still a degree of uncertainty. You're like, who is this guy? What's his deal? What's the story? You don't know anything that's going on. But in spite of all of that, breakfast is being served, and man, does it look good. And so that's something that Studio Ghibli does really well, is ambivalence. There's a whole video about this on YouTube. I can't remember the name of it, but it's like The Art of Ambivalence, or anyway, it's something like that. But it talks about how effective the Studio Ghibli films are at utilizing the feeling of two conflicting emotions or multiple conflicting emotions in one scene. Melancholy is the word that often comes to mind. Melancholy pairs very well with wistfulness, and sometimes even there's a catharticness to it, right? There's a catharticness to sometimes a sadness that's paired with a happiness. And I think that is something that's really important when making a cozy game. If you lean in full on the cozy and the comfort and the safety and the happiness, it will feel shallow. You need to have something to contrast it with. That doesn't mean that you need to have Stardew Valley be set in a war-torn world, although that's kind of a fun idea, and it kind of is. I mean, they talk about like a war in the lore, but it's not really referenced very much. But I have often thought that I think I'd love to make I don't want to say a farming sim, but like a social sim that's about rebuilding a town that was like, bombed to smithereens completely and totally while a civil war is like raging, right? Like something like that. Because that idea of reclaiming, the comfort, the ease, the life back, taming the untamed, that is really appealing and addictive in a lot of ways. Now, anyway, this all boils down to the thing that I think really helps make a game feel cozy, and that is intimacy. Intimacy is what makes something feel truly cozy. And intimacy can exist in sadness, and it can exist in happiness, and it can exist in all manner of emotions. But intimacy is what makes a game feel close, because you feel like you are close with the feelings, the situations, the characters, right? The Last of Us Part 2, I talk about it all the time, and I know it's a polarizing game for a lot of people. That is a comfort game for me. I find it to be immensely cozy, right? Because it pulls me in and holds me so very close. And that it doesn't hold me close to happiness a lot of the time, but it holds me very close. The environment also helps to sell that a lot. It takes place in rainy Seattle. Rainy Seattle, it's always pouring down. You're surrounded with these sensory things that sort of pull you in as well. Intimacy is so key for coziness. And I think that's really, really big and obvious, I think, in some cases. But I think it can be forgotten that if you want to draw players into a game and your intention is to make a cozy game, a farm life game, a social relaxation game, you need to pull them in at every opportunity to the same level as your character. Romance and social interaction is an obvious way to do it. It's one of the reasons why people like Stardew and why it has persisted for so long. I mean, you go to the subreddit and you sort by top most popular, I guarantee it's going to be like fan art of some of the characters that the players love. And the discourse in Stardew Valley community is almost always like you still will go on there and see posts where people are like, I don't understand why people like this character. This character is truly superior. I love the relationship that you have with them, right? So relationships are an obvious way to draw someone into the cozy feeling of things. But you can explore it in a lot of other ways. I think that the intimacy of farm life is something that people find very cozy. You're working with the ground. You're growing things. You're harvesting things. It's all by the fruit of your own labor that you see success and growth, right? That's why farming sims are so popular, is because it feels so good to watch, to, as I said before, tame the untamed, right? To build up things from nothing. That feels tremendous. That's a cozy feeling. It's intimate, right? Again, intimacy in your action, intimacy in your relations. You can have intimacy through sound design, through music, through overarching plot, through environment, through world building. All of these things can work together to make you as the player feel as though you are as close as possible to the character. And that's huge. I think that's the biggest part of it. It's funny because, again, some of my cozy games are often not what I would think are traditionally cozy. Obviously, Stardew Valley, right? I've been playing through Fields of Mistria. I've been really liking it. A lot of things, I kind of want to talk about that at some point. Things I like, things I don't like, but I'll get there later. One of the games that I consider to be cozy, and it's a bit odd, is the game Peak. That game is stressful, though, is the funny thing. It's kind of a stressful game, especially if you play with the default settings and you're timed, and playing by yourself can be very scary. But that game, again, has a very personal, strange aspect to it. You are the one climbing up the walls, and it's so decision-based, moment to moment, and you're so in it that for me, I find it to be quite cozy. I find it to be quite relaxing. Now, I'm a weirdo. I enjoy playing games like Death Stranding too, right? I enjoy these games where traversal is a big part of the mechanics, because I really love the strategy, the real-time decision making that goes behind figuring out what the best route is. I'm not a big long-term planner, but I love short-term decisions in a journey. It's my favorite thing ever. There's a reason why I don't like playing Crusader Kings 3 with a crazy goal in mind, and I often just play it in a reactionary way. I find it to be way more entertaining, but that's neither here nor there. The point is that Peak, for me, I find to be a very cozy game. Multiplayer and single player, I find it to be super cozy. I play that game and I feel transported to a different place entirely. It sucks me in so well, and I think part of it is because it's so tactile. Again, intimacy. I'm using my hands. That's an unfortunate motion to be doing that with, but I was referencing climbing. You're climbing the rocks with your hands. Each input that you put in to Peak has a direct and very immediate response in the environment, and that gameplay pulls me in, and it drags me in. It pulls me in. Red Dead Redemption 2, another great cozy game, despite the fact that it's about being in the West and being a thief and shooting and all sorts of bad things happen, right? It can be very violent, it can be very stressful, it can be very sad and dramatic. That said, riding your horse around, caring for your horse, even just walking, the way that they do animations and gameplay and moment-to-moment things, even a lot of things that people have gripes over, like how long it takes for you to skin animals or pick up a can of beans or eat or whatever, those things, as much as a lot of people have gripes with them, I personally don't, that's what pulls you in, and that's what makes it feel cozy. And I think it's impressive that a game like Stardew Valley is able to manifest that cozy feeling with very minimal animations and very minimal, I don't want to say that it's not like effort was put into it. Obviously effort was put into it, but because visually it is a very simple but effective game, it's impressive to me that through gameplay, tone, setting, character, all that stuff, ambiance, that it's able to have that cozy feeling still. There was another game I was going to talk about, and I cannot remember it for the life of me, but I guess that ultimately is what it boils down to. And just to sort of rehash and recap everything that I'm saying, if you want a game to feel cozy, if your intent is to make a cozy game, it's really important that you ensure that there are multiple emotions at play. Even a game like Animal Crossing New Horizons, which I think is good, but is weak in a lot of aspects compared to how the other games have a very strange feeling about them, particularly the first game. But even Animal Crossing New Horizons, a game that is largely, extremely cozy, it's not a total sandbox. You can't do whatever you want, and there's pushbacks. You've got time constraints. What with the game being real time, you've got things like debt and all sorts of like little things that are peppered throughout the game that are not overwhelming, but there's a general sense of urgency sometimes, or whatever, right? And I think that contrasts really well with the wonderful, delightful, charming nature of the game. The original Animal Crossing, I think, had more pushback against the player, and I think that's what makes it persist in my mind as a infinitely more cozy and intimate experience. The visuals it's a lot darker visually, like color-wise, and the way they did the visual design. It's not as bright and sunny feeling. It's got more full and rich colors, and I don't really know how to describe it, but just compare the two side by side. Compare Animal Crossing New Horizons and compare the original Animal Crossing. And other than obvious graphic fidelity differences, there's a very clear difference in how they approached it visually, style-wise. Villagers are often more mean to you from time to time, but I think that also makes it, when they're particularly sweet to you, it makes it stand out a bit more. You're not in control in Animal Crossing. You are in control of Animal Crossing New Horizons. You are, you're the island representative, right? So you can shape the island to your will. But in the original Animal Crossing, you can't. You cannot do a lot of things, and that makes the freedom that over the things that you can choose significantly more important. So again, if you're making a cozy game, find that balance. Figure out what you want the player to have control over. Give them control over that, but figure out what you want them to not have control over. And maybe that's the emotional tone. Maybe it's certain characters. Maybe there's some form of pushback against the player. But that pushback is essential. Do not forego the pushback. You need to have some degree of opposition. It can be big or it can be really small. It depends on the scale of your game. It depends on what you're trying to do. But having that pushback is so important for the player, because the contrast in their mind between the ideal that they are working towards in the game and experiencing in the game from time to time, that contrasts with the pushback. And that is what makes a game feel cozy, because you get to see where you are versus where you were, or where you're going versus where you are, or what you're trying to aim for versus what you're trying to avoid or fight against, right? Stardew Valley would not be as people would not be as engaged with the main plot if Jojo Corporation was not there to push against it. That is so key to this sort of game. So anyway, long rambly video. I'd like to upgrade my camera soon, because the frame rate is really strange, and it'll like, I think it has to do just with the lighting and the focus, but the frame rate's really strange, and I think I'd like a slightly better setup. I don't want to go crazy, because generally I want to keep these videos a little low effort, because otherwise I won't do them. If I have to sit here and edit for hours or write scripts and stuff like that, I'm not going to do it, because I'm busy. I have other things that I'm doing. We'll see. That said, thank you for watching or listening or whatever. And as always, I'd love to hear your thoughts. If there's games that you think are cozy, comfortable, that invite you to be intimate with the game, leave them in the comments, especially if you feel like it's a very unusual one. Like for me, Peak, right? Red Dead Redemption, these games that perhaps at a glance I wouldn't say are cozy, but in fact I find to be extremely soothing. I would love to hear other people's thoughts on games like that. And okay, that's about it. Bye.